Perhaps hell is simply a place, an antithesis to eternal paradise, a location that the wicked are judged to, cast into, that they may toil and burn forevermore. Perhaps. Perhaps hell is a concept, a staple in human existence. Hell has pervaded for as long as people have assigned morality to spirituality. Hell is a warning, an opportunity for people to recognize their ways in life so they may redeem themselves before death. Hell is something to fear, something to hate. Hell is inevitable and yet formless. It takes on different elements, features, and names from faith to faith, culture to culture, changing what it is and what it punishes based on what the times strive to avoid. Hell is designed to be terrifying. But humans are as humans have always been, so we cope with what scares us through stories. And what better way to cope with it than by confronting it, occupying it, even just for a little while? Katabasis is a Greek term to describe a journey to hell, traditionally by the living. At its core, a katabasis is built from a number of fundamental elements. First, descent. Hell is traditionally subterranean, often deeper than any point in the world. The need to descend further than would seem physically possible or spatially rational is intrinsically tied to hell. The myth of Orpheus sees the musician finding the entrance to and descending beneath the earth into hell. Second, rescue. Why else would anyone venture into hell itself if not for someone they cared about? After the death of his wife Eurydice, Orpheus descends into hell, overcomes the guard dog Cerberus, and confronts the god of the dead to rescue his love from death. Third, escape. Hell is not for the living. When a mortal gains entry to hell, it is not with intent to stay there. They intend to find what they came for and leave. Reunited with Eurydice, Orpheus escapes from hell, although tragically Eurydice is pulled back to hell in a moment of weakness and doubt from Orpheus. This element of escape can be part of the story, but is not a requirement. Failure, especially in the last moments, can make for a more resonant story. We see this element of overcoming hell a lot in video games. Cuphead and Mugman descend to hell in order to fight the devil and free themselves from the consequences of a bad night of gambling. Kratos descends to and escapes both the Greek and Norse underworlds several times over the course of his adventures. The Doom Slayer has made an eternal career of traipsing or tripping into hell, breaking its foundation at its knees and walking back out, covered in everyone else's blood and viscera, but alive nonetheless. Some games follow the elements of Katabasis more closely. In Dante's Inferno, the Crusader Dante descends to the deepest pits of hell in order to rescue his stolen love, Beatrice, and ultimately escapes to the mountain of purgatory. Hellblade, Senua's Sacrifice, sees Senua descend to hell in order to rescue her husband, Dillion, from the clutches of Hela, and in the end, Senua escapes. But these are all very specifically about hell, the place. Perhaps, like I said, hell is a concept. Perhaps hell is war, as simple as a constant fight for survival, the gnawing awareness that no matter what army you belong to, you are ever just one helpless person pushing deeper and deeper into the dark in an effort to break through to the other side. Perhaps hell is industry, chugging and spewing forever in perpetual expansion while we synthesize the natural into something horrific. Or bureaucracy, hamstringing processes far beyond the mortal coil, taking the absolute worst parts of life and applying them to death. Perhaps hell is nature, choking the sun and the light out from above us, overwhelming us with just how small we are in the grand scheme of the world as we grasp at a pinprick or a keyhole of light just beyond the threshold. No, that's not it. None of that is it. Hell is more than that. Hell is not just one thing. Perhaps hell is so much more. Perhaps hell is a mirror. Silent Hill 2 sees James Sunderland arriving at Silent Hill after receiving a letter from his wife, Mary, telling him to meet her in their special place in the town. James intends to find Mary and leave Silent Hill with her. But a dead person can't write a letter. James knows she's dead. Illness took her 3 years ago. But maybe she's alive, or she can be alive. James just has to find her. James descends past the threshold into dense fog and concrete labyrinths. Wandering shades and monsters emerge from the fog, trying to attack, slow, or stop James. It is usually easier to just avoid his guilt. It is usually easier to just avoid the monsters instead of confronting them outright, but they can be overcome. Through his journey, James meets different people. Eddie and Angela, wanderers that suffer from some internalized darkness. Eddie suffers from having been bullied all his life, what it's done to his self-worth and self-image, and how it pushed him over the edge into violence and self-harm. Angela has suffered years of traumatic abuse from her family, both physical and emotional, and carries all of that weight as she searches for her mother within Silent Hill. There's Laura, an 8-year-old girl who tagged along with Eddie, who seems surprisingly calm about the town and the nightmares crawling within. She also has some connection to Mary, but doesn't trust James enough to let on much more. "None of your business," she says. "You didn't love Mary anyway." But he did. He must. Why else would he be here in this place looking for her years after her death? James moves through an apartment complex, encountering and evading a terrifying pyramid-headed stalker, and encounters Maria, an unsettling same but different iteration of Mary, James's wife. Maria, in time, comes to know more and more about James and his life, despite him never mentioning those details. In their attempts to find Laura, James and Maria explore an abandoned hospital and are chased by the stalker. James escapes but watches as the stalker murders Maria. James moves on with his original task: find Mary. The further James progresses, the more he descends. Stairwells, holes in the floor, architecture turned on its side, graves dug deep into the earth. Down he goes, defying spatial understanding of the town, only to come out the other end as though he hadn't descended an inch. He finds Maria, too, alive and well, and only minutes later, beaten to death. James moves on again with his original task: find Mary. Eddie has a paranoid breakdown, misinterpreting James's words and attacking him in a rage. "Don't get all holy on me, James. This town called you, too. You and me are the same. We're not like other people. Don't you know that?" Angela resigns herself to death, feeling like that is the only way to ease or end her long suffering. In a reversal of tropes, Angela walks up, not down, into searing flame. You see it too? For me, it's always like this. James ultimately reaches his and Mary's special place in the Lakeview Hotel, watching a video they made 3 years ago. A nostalgic memory gives way to a grainy and distorted truth. Mary didn't simply die. James murdered her, smothering her with a bed pillow in the late stages of her illness. Denial falls away, leaving only guilt. Everything comes to a head. The enemies, all manifestations of James's repressed guilt. Nurses who cared for Mary, whose mouths are wrapped in a way that smothers them, who shriek with the same bursting anger that Mary would shout at James. Mannequins, seemingly made up of the leg braces that Mary needed to walk in the later part of her disease. Lying figures, both bedridden and corpse, all of them attacking James, trying to force him to confront what he did. Where James sees those monsters, Eddie perceives bullies and abusers. Angela likely sees something tied to her father, the prime source of her trauma, though we are never told so outright. Pyramid Head isn't necessarily out to kill James, but to hunt Maria as a way to punish James, to remind him of what he did, what he must live with. Maria, likewise, has a purpose that remains unfulfilled. She keeps coming back to life to make James repeatedly relive that pain of loss. Maria is seemingly not her own entity, but another projection and manifestation of James's actions and guilt, born of the town, same as its monsters and fog. How much of Silent Hill manifests from James's guilt, from his repressed hatred of himself, of his circumstances, of Mary? Is it designed to show him, in whatever twisted, convoluted way, how terrible he was? Is it all to reflect him back at himself, to make him recognize and relive the hurt he inflicted on others? Perhaps perhaps this is why Laura can seemingly wander freely through the town. There's nothing to reflect back at her. Where James is plagued with monsters born of his own psyche, twisting alleys and dark alternate worlds, Laura is free. She is young, innocent, has not had the chance to live through regret or grapple with guilt, grief, or pain. She is a child. Hell, here, now, is not for her, and so she doesn't experience hell. The finale sees James confronting and acknowledging Pyramid Head for what they truly are, a means to punish him. It sees James confronting Mary, admitting to her that he killed her because she was a burden to his life. It sees James deluding himself again, leaving the town with Maria, alive again. She coughs. Mary coughed like that too. You'd better do something about that cough. James has learned nothing, continues to delude himself against the truth, and threatens to relive the nightmare all over again. Sees James confronting Maria, standing firm that no one can substitute the love he had with Mary. He will finally have a chance to talk with Mary, or a projection of Mary, tell her his regrets about coming to resent her. Mary tells him that he's suffered enough. James, still racked with guilt, cannot forgive himself and takes his own life, drowning in the lake. Mary tells him that's not why he killed her. Perhaps it was all to ease her suffering. Perhaps she refuses to admit that he was weak and anger overtook him in that moment. Perhaps that reason remains buried deeper still. James finds closure nonetheless and escapes the town with Laura. That's the thing about reflections. Different lighting, different surfaces, smudges, cracks, angles, all make for a different reflection. Same as what you're looking at, what you're fixating on can make for a different reflection as well. Perhaps hell is a mirror. Hell forces us to look inward and confront ourselves. But at what cost? Or have we already paid the price and are just being shown what it cost us? Maybe it's simply a chance to reflect and, acknowledge the truth? Redeem ourselves? Forgive ourselves? Delude ourselves? Perhaps hell is what we make it, whether we realize it or not. Perhaps hell is a crucible, designed to push us to our limits, show us what we are truly capable of. But for what purpose? Spec Ops: The Line sets the stage with Captain Martin Walker recounting his service with Colonel John Conrad, leader of the 33rd Infantry Battalion, the Damned 33rd. Conrad's selflessness, the loyalty he inspired, and the impact he left on Walker. Months ago, the city of Dubai was buffeted with the worst sandstorms in recorded history, leaving the general population stranded. Conrad volunteered the Damned 33rd to assist with relief efforts, ultimately defying evacuation orders from the US Army in order to stay and try to help. Nearly all communication was cut during the storms. Then, a looped signal from Conrad broke through the storm wall. Evacuation of the city has failed, and the death toll is incalculable. On this information, a 3-man Delta Force squad, Captain Walker, Lieutenant Adams, and Sergeant Lugo, breaches the storm wall to perform reconnaissance, confirm survivors within the city, and radio for extraction. After a short descent from a broken highway, Delta encounters a group of insurgents and pursues them towards the city, encountering a dying member of the 33rd. Walker pushes the squad further into the city, encountering the 33rd en masse before being mistaken for CIA operatives and attacked. Delta returns fire on the 33rd and progresses, taunted by the seemingly omnipresent Radio Man. They encounter civilian processing camps. The 33rd is rounding up civilians. Delta liberates them by gunning down the 33rd, but the civilians want nothing to do with them. Walker resolves to find Conrad. He has to know what's going on, why the 33rd has gone rogue. Everything snowballs from there. Delta, led by Walker, descends further and further down into the city, inexplicably finding themselves higher up or on rooftops, only to descend into the maw of the city again and again. Walker elects to use white phosphorus on an encampment of the 33rd, annihilating every white dot in the base. Only after walking through the aftermath does Delta realize that this was also a shelter for civilians moved from the initial processing camp. Walker breaks. is his comrade's doing, and he must answer for his crimes. Same as Walker and Delta are on a constant downward physical trajectory using rappels, zip lines, and massive falls, they are ever on a downward mental spiral. The mission takes its toll on them, what they have to do in order to progress, the lengths they must go to in order to find justice, in order to take revenge, in order to find Conrad. Conrad reaches out to Walker on a walkie-talkie, testing and taunting him as Delta pushes further into the city. Walker is forced to decide who of two men deserves to die for a water-based crime and its aftermath. Delta meets up with CIA agent Riggs, who aims to cripple the 33rd's pull over the city by stealing their water supply. Delta assists. Conrad berates the decision but is powerless to stop Walker. Only too late does Delta realize that Riggs intended to destroy, not steal, the water supply, wiping out the city's population in a matter of days and covering up everything that has happened in Dubai. Walker condemns Riggs, regroups with Delta, and assaults the Radio Man's base of operations, calling for an evacuation of the city. One rough helicopter assault later, Walker and Adams regroup and pursue a stranded Lugo, who takes shelter in a refugee camp. The refugees turn on Lugo, lynching him for his part in everything that has happened before Walker and Adams can reach him. Unable to revive Lugo, Walker decides what to do with the refugees. He and Adams stage a final push against Conrad's last bastion. Walker, in a final bid to find Conrad, surrenders to the 33rd, but Adams feels he has come too far for anything less than oblivion. He pushes Walker out of the way, and Walker escapes to Conrad's stronghold, the last remnants of the 33rd pushing against a broken Adams. And with that, Walker finally reaches Conrad, and someone has to pay. Someone has to pay for your crimes, Walker. Conrad reveals that Walker realizes that Conrad has been dead for a time already. Suicide by gunshot. But Conrad remains firmly established as a splinter in Walker's psyche. Conrad recontextualizes everything. You were never meant to come here. Delta could have left at any point. Their orders were to confirm survivors and leave. None of this would have happened if you just stopped. But on you marched. You're no savior. Your talents lie elsewhere. You're here because you wanted to feel like something you're not. A hero. A hero would save people from an opposing force. A hero would be able to honor their mentor. A hero would keep their team alive. But Walker isn't a hero. Conrad's quips and poking and prodding throughout the mission take on new meaning. As a part of Walker, maybe he was trying to stop Walker from getting here, not as a force of opposition, but as a saving grace. Think about what you're doing, Walker, and maybe you'll realize that this is too far for you, for anyone. We come back to the Crucible. War and conflict are inherently tests, balancing morality and the actions you are ordered to take in pursuit of actions that you take in pursuit of a mission. But hell is more than that. From the first descent from the highway, Delta has entered hell itself and started taking its test. What is its purpose? To break down Delta into something to break down Walker into something that fits in with the rest of the damned shades, stuck defending their corner of the dead lands? Or is it to show what he is truly capable of at his core? It is only by not knowing that we are taking a test in the first place that we can truly be tested on what we know, how we'd act, and who we are. Hell is testing Walker to see if he is worthy of ruling it as Conrad did. Where Conrad's hell was one of failed operations and splintering factions, chaos amidst attempts at order, Walker's hell is lifeless, devoid, and empty. Walker descended into hell to rescue Conrad. All that's left now is how, or if, he will escape. The penultimate question is where to lay the blame. On the one hand, Walker can acknowledge the truth of everything that happened. It was preventable, and it was his fault. Whether by his own hand or Conrad's, Walker will take his place among the shadows and shades that he had a hand in tormenting. So close to the end, he has failed Hell's test, retaining the last vestige of his humanity. Or, on the other hand, Walker can lay the blame all on Conrad. Walker did what he had to do in the hell of Conrad's making. It takes a strong man to deny what's in front of him. Walker usurps Conrad, abandoning reality and occupying the epicenter of the scorched and dead lands, and sends a signal to the outside world for evacuation. The final question arrives in a group of rescue vehicles, themselves an expedition into the very center of hell itself. The final question is simple. What will you do now? Demand that someone else take your life since you couldn't take it yourself? Shed your fractured soul into the sands to be pulled out of hell? After everything, do you still choose release and oblivion? Or do you take aim, chew up these wanderers, and call for blood to the outside world? Walker cements his place in hell, rooted at the center of a lake of sand and glass. He has passed the test. Perhaps hell is a crucible designed to break down one man to the foundation of his soul and find out if he truly belongs here. Perhaps hell is occupied by many, but it is only for a single soul. Perhaps hell is an engine. Complicated, interconnected, but vital in ways that sometimes we don't fully understand. Consider any piece of machinery, small or large. To fix it, change it, optimize it, to know how to manipulate it requires a profound understanding of its inner workings, its connections, its lifeblood. To truly understand how it works requires training, certification, practice, precision, perfection. The last thing you want to do is try to fix, tinker with, or just rattle around something that you don't completely understand. The plot of Signalis follows Elster, an awakened LSTR-type replica android unit, searching for her missing gestalt, or human, partner, Ariana Young. Alina So, after a crash landing on a faraway planet. Remember our promise rings in Elster's mind. Elster crosses an archway, descends into the planet, and crawls through a small tunnel before finding herself in the Sherpinsky 23 mining facility. Other replica staff throughout the facility have degenerated into rudderless husks, lashing out and attacking anything that gets too close. This puts a damper on Elster's search for Ariane. This puts a damper on Elster's search for Alina, but she finds other Gestalt survivors and functioning replica units, all searching for someone or something as well. All with the odd exception of Adler, the facility's administrator. He finds Elster, seems to want to help her find Alina, but then pushes Elster down an empty elevator shaft. You shouldn't have returned. Elster's fall is softened by a mass of other Elsters, Elster's fall is softened by a mass of other LSTR units, allowing her to continue. Adler, Elster learns, is able to remember memories that he personally has never experienced. He believes that he is recollecting memories from other realities, aware of some kind of overlap between these different planes, aware of countless lives that he has not lived. The facility becomes twisted and incongruous. Directions mean little. There is no spatial consistency. There is meat, unexplainable and grotesque. Elster pushes past it all, finds Adler at the foot of what she's looking for, an archway. What waits beyond the threshold, Adler wonders. It doesn't matter, Elster dismisses. Perhaps this is not the first time Elster's been to this point either. Elster crosses the archway, returning to her ship, but failing to re-enter it, tearing herself apart in the process. She seems to die before waking up again, back on the ship. Even if their government-mandated search for a habitable planet has not yielded anything yet, Alina waits for Elster. Anything yet? Ariane waits for Elster, ready to celebrate their 3,000th cycle aboard the ship together with some music and dancing. Remember our promise. Elster awakens, finding a way into the ship and repairing her broken frame. There is a hole within the spaceship leading down. She descends, finding herself back in the Sierpinski 23 facility. But it's different. She remembers how it used to be. She has to. The flesh has grown and overtaken large swaths of the facility. This is wrong. But Elster pushes forward. Remember our promise. The landscape shudders and shifts to the colonized moon Rotfront. Elster finds what she needs in order to open one final tunnel, confronting the command replica Falk. Confronting Falk, whose memories are being overtaken by Elster's. Ultimately defeating Falk. Elster finds herself at the archway once more. Adler waits for her, stripped of his flesh, stripped of his shell, his soul laid bare here at the end of everything. Perhaps hell is an engine. Souls drift and wander, lost in the veins and chambers of the mechanism, searching for something they do not have the power or ability to attain. They suffer as they accept they will never find or never keep the thing that gives them purpose. Motes of dust in the grand design are crushed, vaporized, or assimilated for having a hope and a prayer between the gears. Elster, whether through luck, strength, or force of will, persists. She's walked through the arch many times before, sometimes being pushed to the bottom of an elevator shaft, sometimes dying aboard the downed starship. With each trip, each walk through the arch, facts change, reality warps, the machine shakes, something else comes loose. But there is a single mechanic trying to keep it all together, aware of maybe not all, but enough of the machine. Adler stands opposed to Elster and any other entity who would affect the machine. Even if he doesn't understand it all, he knows enough to recognize the changes, the degradation, the results of someone else's tampering. Are you really willing to go through with this once more? You've seen what happens. This world cannot take much more. This may be our last chance. If you go back, it'll all fall apart. I can't let that happen. You'll destroy everything. Hell here is a thing that no one was meant to see, comprehend, or enter. It is an engine too vast and complicated for any creature to understand, let alone tamper with. It is grander than any engine we can fathom, any system we can visualize, any triumph of human engineering or imagination. This engine spans and powers all of reality. Hell is a vital heart that we know nothing about. It cannot be tampered with, lest it rip apart the fabric of reality itself, of everything we know. But what if we can't see the big picture? What if we don't care about the big picture? Remember our promise. Elster is not here to fix the machine. She is here to fulfill her promise, no matter what she has to do, no matter how many times she has to start over, no matter who she finds, what she breaks, how far into the machine she must descend. Adler tries to stop her. Elster fights back. They maim each other, but Elster pushes past her wounds and enters the archway, finds her ship again, and enters. The 3,000th cycle aboard the ship in space has come and gone. Cycles perpetuated longer and longer. The mission was a failure, but the government wrote off the vessel and its occupants as a loss. Ariane will die in space, Elster will shut down, and the ship will drift among the void forever. The ship's nuclear reactor malfunctions, seeping radiation throughout the ship. Ariane is poisoned, the radiation slowly rotting her from the inside. The only alternative is to seal Ariane away in a cryogenic pod, pausing the radiation sickness to keep searching for a habitable planet, causing the radiation sickness to stop Ariane from dying. Because Ariane is the only tether Elster has. Elster reaches the door to the cryo bay. Katabasis is about the descent and the recovery in hell. It does not always have an escape. Elster has descended too deep, irrevocably destroyed too much of the mechanisms to retain a path out. There is no going back. only one more step to the very core of the machine. Perhaps there is only the descent in the end. Elster cannot cross that final threshold, unable to face Ariane after everything she's seen and done. She leaves the ship, begs forgiveness, and dies alone. Perhaps she pushes through. I've come back for you. I'm sorry. I don't remember. There is no one left to save at the end, no promise to remember. Elster falls against the cryopod, stays there for just a moment longer as Ariane's hand brushes her, and dies. Perhaps Ariane remembers and Elster wavers, but Ariane pushes her ahead. You have to do it. It's time for this to end. Elster fulfills her promise at last and dies. A replica with one mission, one purpose, one person they have ever cared about dies, perhaps never having known the full scope of what they've done. All they did was make a promise and crawl through hell to keep it. In the end, there is only darkness, emptiness. Not fire, nor brimstone, nor suffering, simply an end to all things as the engine gives a dying rattle and stops. Without the engine spinning at its core, reality itself stops and fades to black. Perhaps hell is an engine too vast for any one being to comprehend, where neither walls nor horizons nor skies can show you its limits. Perhaps, after descending so deep into such a mechanism, all we have is what little of it we can see and what we're looking for within. Hell will persist in people as long as people persist. It will change with the world, its beliefs, what collectives hold dear and paramount, and what they condemn. But then hell will also change with the individual, with every generation and iteration of writers, designers, and artists pulling from their own fears and nightmares. It will be a place, a society, a system, a circumstance, a concept, all at once. Perhaps hell can be anything for anyone. This may be its most terrifying feature. Different descents, different attempts to escape, different people at its core. A hell of 1,000 lives. Perhaps there is no singular hell. Perhaps we are the architects of an unfathomable chain, each of us in our lives, our mistakes, our regrets, constructing our own link in this unending string of what it means for a person to suffer. Perhaps this is hell.